kind of like God peeled back a curtain in our mind, and he said to me, Tom, yeah, look at all these people in the community. They're never going to come to this church that you're pastoring in. And essentially what I heard him say to me was, will you go to them and bring my church to them and show them what the family of God is all about?
You're listening to the Sent Ones podcast, where we help disciples of Jesus discover their calling, develop their skills, and get deployed to their mission.
Hey, love jumping back in on the Sent Ones podcast. I'm excited to talk today with Josh, as always, and then our friend Tom, who is actually joining us from the field live. You may notice in the background, which is awesome. Tom, I just want to actually quickly ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, but even what are you doing right now? Like, where are you at? Where has God landed you? And then we're going to backfill with asking how you got there in the bigger picture, but just tell us a little about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, so Tom Clark, and married to my wife Dana for 17 years, dating her for 23. We have 3 kids, 14, 12-year-old and an 8-year-old, 2 daughters and a son. We live here in South Florida. Specifically today, I don't know how specific you're getting with that question, but we are at a college campus today, just trying to share with the students that we're going to have a Bible study going on this semester, and want them to know where they can find us and how they can get connected. Just as another, you can call it net, if you will, just to catch people for the kingdom. And anyway, we've been laboring here for the last 15 years, but the first 6, we were youth pastoring. This is kind of, I guess, getting into our story a little bit. And man, God was doing some incredible things. My wife and I, we were discipled really well when we were in high school and college, and it made such a profound impact on our life that we wanted to be all about that too, no matter what we did as a vocation. And God ended up calling us to the full-time ministry. And then about 2014, we were doing a Bible study in our home with different people from different churches all around the community. And it was a really fun study. We're studying the church, names of the church, functions of the church, purposes of the church. And we were looking at even the Old Testament. Whenever God's people gathered together, what was happening there? What were they doing? And long story short, God really convicted us. We saw a healthy disconnect between the church at large in the U.S. that we know and also the church in Scripture. And we just said a simple prayer. We said, God, if you would somehow use us to be a part of realigning the two, then we would be honored. And that's when everything shifted for us. And God brought some significant people into our lives and helped show us what indeed he was calling us into. And to keep it simple for people when we talk about our story, it's kind of like God peeled back a curtain in our mind, and he said to me, Tom, yeah, look at all these people in the community. They're never going to come to this church that you're pastoring in. And essentially what I heard him say to me was, will you go to them and bring my church to them and show them what the family of God is all about? And we said, yes, God, yeah, we'll go. We'll do that. And so in the midst of identifying what that looked like and where we'd end up landing, we fasted and we prayed and we sought God. And as we were praying and fasting, one of the scriptures that God laid on our heart was indeed Acts 1:8. And what we heard him say was, this is your Jerusalem. Start here. This is the place I've called you to. I want you to labor here, and I'm going to teach you things and show you things while you're here. And then there will be indeed a Judea and Samaria season of ministry for you guys, and also an ends of the earth as well. And so we said, okay, I guess we're going to, start doing this. And so what is this, right? So we do what we call just very simple grassroots missions work. And so what that looks like is we engage people far from God. We share the good news of Jesus with them. We disciple anybody who's hungry to learn more about the King. And we start gathering people in really simple communities that we believe God calls his church once those people come to faith and know him. And then the last thing is we train other people to do all those things as well. right? And so that's kind of what we're doing. We're just trying to follow the model that Jesus has given us in the Word with his own life when he was here on the earth. And so Acts 1:8, here we are in South Florida, and we're trying to just do that work very simply. I would say over the progression of time. So that was in 2015 when that whole thing happened for us. Big transition. We resigned from our local church, asked God, do you want us to get a job in the community to provide for our family? Or is this something you're asking us to do with full-time hours and with our vocation? And he indeed said it was with our vocation, so we started raising support to do what we do. We went 6 months without receiving any income, but we didn't miss a meal, we didn't miss a bill, and God provided for us. We saw our savings dwindle down quite a bit, but we just acknowledged that, hey, God gave us that savings for the season that we were in that midst of the transition. And so from there, the support finally came in, and we were able to go about this work full throttle. And so anyway, from 2015 to about 2017, 2018, we were just very faithfully laboring here in South Florida. One of the cool things that we discovered around that time is there was some research back then from George Barna that said that this was our area specifically was one of the number one most never church populations in the U.S. at that time. So never church is being defined as people who've never ever regularly attended a church at any point in their life. And the region was from West Palm to Fort Pierce. And we live smack dab in the middle of that region. So we said, wow, there's an incredible need here. And so let's go. And so that's what we started at. And then about 2017, 2018, we started getting calls and contacts from people, not us specifically. There were people who contacted us directly, but also our team at the time that we were serving with. And people would just say, hey, I have a heart to reach my community, and I want help. And so we'd come and we'd visit them. We'd pack the family in a car, drive across the state, wherever they were, and we would do like a little training weekend with them and a lot of the believers that those people were connected to, and just show them how they can start missionally engaging their community around them. And did that for about a year. We trained a lot of different traditional churches and just also your normal everyday people who just said, come help us. And after about a year or so of that, felt like God was calling us overseas next. And started off the year in 2018 with a really long fast. And it was a good, I don't know, I've mentioned that before. I think fasting has been a really key practice for us whenever we wanted to hear God in the midst of making big decisions. And so we were not praying about where to go, but in the midst of the fast, God says, hey, it's time. Overseas is next. And so as time went on, God spoke to us and was calling us to Southeast Asia. We ended up serving him in a couple countries over there. And it was incredible. We took the year to transition. In the beginning of 2019, we launched. And we launched with a team of people, which was incredible. It was a great experience. And served over in Southeast Asia for a bit. And we were doing the exact same thing that we were doing in Florida the whole time. It just looked a little different because it was a different culture, different people that we were ministering to. So that is the story. And if you wanted to continue on, everyone knows what happened in 2020. And because we didn't have a stable visa, we ended up having to come back. The country we were in was closed. The country borders were closed for 2 years. And we still had an apartment full of our possessions that we could not access, but we were paying rent for, which was a challenge. But after the country reopened, we were able to go back, reconcile our apartment, and then just get up on a mountain and pray. And we just said, God, do you want us to come back here? And he said, not yet. So I was a little bummed because I would love to be back over there right now. But as a family, we have postured ourselves to say, God, we'll go wherever you want us to go. And right now in the season that we're in, we know that it's to stay here and to labor again in South Florida as we have been in the past. And that brings us up to this moment today. So here we are.
That's beautiful, Tom. Thank you for sharing that, man. Because, honestly, kind of hearing other Sent Ones stories and really hearing how God spoke to them, how he led them, how he guided them. It really does help us as we think through discovering our own calling and really trying to hear God's voice. Really listening to how he spoke to other people, listening to how he's guided other people is incredibly helpful. A couple things that, as you were saying, that really popped out to me. I love that you put such an emphasis on prayer and fasting. We've seen that over and over again, and in all the different interviews that we've done with different people, that through different seasons of fasting, it really does allow us to kind of tune our hearts to God's voice a little bit better when we're giving up things in order to really spend more time with Him and hear His voice and things like that. And so, those of you that are out there listening, if any of you are out there struggling to hear God's voice right now, I do want to encourage you to take Tom and Dana's example and block out a time to fast and really ask the Lord for clarity. The Lord does not hide things from us in like a evil, mean way where He's like, well, I know exactly what you need to be doing, but I'll never share it with you. He does want to give us what we need when we need it, and He does want us to pursue Him and be in deep relationship with Him. And so I just want to encourage you guys listening, take some time out, try to really hear His voice so that you can really be guided and led by that. And so, Tom, unpack a little bit. We would love to hear what you guys are up to now. I know you mentioned it briefly, but what does living the Sent life look like for you now on a daily basis? Like, unpack for us, if somebody is out there and they're like, man, what do I do Monday morning? What does that look like for you guys in the season of life right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. Man, our ebb and flow of life is constantly changing. And I would say annually, when you look at our schedule and how we're stewarding our time, there's three major shifts, right? And I think this is typical for any family, right? We have a shift kind of heading into the school year where our schedule kind of tweaks and changes. Another shift when it heads into the new year, around January 1st, and then also another one when you head into summer. And so if you were to ask me that question in different seasons, it'd look very differently, right? But right now, if you were, just to keep it simple, to give you guys a good framework, and for those that are listening, those 5 areas that I mentioned in terms of what we're doing, if you were to take a snapshot of our life throughout the week, you'd find us doing one of those 5 things predominantly. So engaging lostness, sharing the good news, making disciples, having a lot of church gatherings. Maybe some might identify those as Bible studies or small groups or whatever. But it's a gathering of God's people for the focus of and purpose of growth in our relationship with Him and drawing near to Him. And then we do a lot of training of others as well, right? And so there might be some fixed things in our schedule right now, but typically, at least for me right now, living the Sent life, we take Fridays off as a day of rest and Sabbath. But Monday through Thursday, predominantly from the morning to about lunch, I have a lot of meetings with people. I'm a morning person, so that's just the time that works for me. But I try to make a lot of connections with people before they go to work, and then even people who are students in our community. And we get together, we talk life, we talk God, and we talk about how the two collide. And in the afternoon, I do some administrative work from my computer mostly, or time on the phone, contacting individuals, setting up meetings. But and then I have a couple times throughout the week that are blocked off for specifically going out and looking for people to minister to pray for, to share the good news with, to share our testimony with. I try to do that with a team of people. One of the things I try to practice in most of my schedule is that with me principle from Mark 3:14, where Jesus says that He chose 12 that they would be with Him. So that is something that we try to do as much as we can, is just bring people with us to the places that we're going. Because a lot of that discipleship stuff is caught more than it is taught, right? And so we want there to be just a rubbing off of one another effect that takes place. And also for other people that we're pouring our lives into, to see how we interact to life when it comes at us, whether it's someone cutting us off on the road or a conflict with someone that is close to us. How do we respond in those life situations? I think that is where a lot of the essence of discipleship comes from. So, but again, our schedule could look like one thing one week, and then next week it could look completely different.
Yeah.
Because we're in the business of people. People's lives are constantly changing, and so oftentimes our schedule has to adjust
Yeah.
in order to meet with them. I think one of the struggles and challenges that we face, at least in the U.S., in terms of connecting to people and ministering to them, is just people's availability. And so it's a precious thing. It's a resource of people's time, and I would say that resource of time is even for many more important than the resource of money. And so when people give up their time, it's valuable, and so we just try to make ourselves as available as we possibly can, and that means you have a constantly changing schedule, week after week. So,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I no, and you're right on, bro. I mean, I think all of us that are trying our best to live kind of the full-time sent life, every week looks quite a bit different. But one thing that you mentioned, I think that's going to be really key for some of our listeners is really just the intentionality of what you're talking about. You know, it's very easy when life gets busy. If you're not intentional and if you don't have certain things set aside on your calendar, they end up not taking priority many times, right? Like, and so I loved what you said there, Tom. Like, you know, you've got some time set aside where you're going to go out and try to get into the harvest, look for people far from God, look for people that you can pray with or speak with or have spiritual conversations with. I think a lot of us, we lose out on opportunities like that because we don't have the intentionality that you're talking about. And you know, for those of you listening right now that are really wanting to step into this life more fully, even if you're not full time right now, even if you've got another job or whatever, it really is about being intentional. It really is about setting aside certain times on your calendar, even if it's 30, 45 minutes or an hour or whatever. But what would it look like to get out there with people and begin to encounter people far from God, pray for them, share the gospel with them, have spiritual conversations with them, love on them? What does that actually practically look like? And so I just want to encourage you guys listening to really, it really is about intentionality there. Tom, can you unpack for us just so that people know? Take us through just practically when you set aside time. What does that look like? You said that you sometimes will take people with you because it's more caught than it is taught. But what do you guys go out and actually do? What does that look like when you try to be intentional with your life like that?
Yeah, it could look like a number of things. So I think so we have two blocked off times right now in this season, Sunday afternoons and Thursday nights, where we go out and to specifically pray for people, engage them, share our testimony, share the gospel, and see who's interested. We're not looking to twist anyone's arm into the kingdom, but to look for the people that God has been working in and who are ready to respond to his good news. And so we'll have those blocked off times that we keep as intentional focuses for us. And then throughout the week, as people are available, we'll invite them into everything that we have going on. We know that not everyone will be available or able, but we just try to keep an open schedule so that people can join us in any activity that we have going on. And we have a slew of different groups that are meeting throughout the week. Some are more discipleship focused. Some are more focused on developing leaders. We have a few leaders that we're pouring into who've started groups themselves. Some identify as church, some identify as just Bible study or just a local, like escape ministry even. We just try to help them identify next steps to take in terms of what God's put on their heart to do. Yeah, I would say in addition to those blocked off times, when we are talking to people who have normal everyday jobs and lives who are not full time as a sent one, we just encourage them to use where life already takes them and to be focused and intentional there. So if it's in their workplace, okay, if you're working a 9 to 5 and you have a family, well then, yeah, the commodity of time is very, very precious to you. So we would just encourage them to look for opportunities in the midst of their everyday life to take advantage for the kingdom. That could be a lunch break with coworkers. Hey, once a week, could you just open up a time where people can have some spiritual conversation with you while you're having lunch? Or maybe it's prayer walking around the place that you work during that break time. There's so many ways to engage our world missionally in the midst of what we already have going on. It does not always require additional time that's set apart in order to live the sent life. So a lot of times when we're talking with people and local leaders that we're pouring into, that's a lot of the conversation that we'll have together, helping them identify with their own time, what does this life look like for them. So.
Yeah, that's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple more questions, and this is a little bit of a change gear, but I was just thinking, I don't think you're for sure not unique in what 2020 did to a lot of people that were overseas, but definitely not unique in the grand scheme of just the coming and going of sent ones and the realities of just visas and all that. Is there anything you'd share as an encouragement? You mentioned it really briefly of just like being on that mountain and being like, it almost came across like didn't expect that God was going to call us home, but how would you encourage somebody that maybe they're right now wrestling that, or they've been home now for 6 months, they're like, what am I doing? Like, just what encouragement would you give to somebody? Because I think obviously a lot of what we talked about is maybe that front lines, right? Head out your door. But the reality is we're trying to live as a sent ones. We're going to be in different places, different seasons. Just any encouragement for that person that felt like they were closer to, what a good missionary is supposed to do and now got called back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think my encouragement would be God is not, he wants to use us to produce much fruit for him, and he will. But more than anything else, he's looking for faithfulness. He just wants you to be faithful in the season that you're in with what he's asked you to do, and that doesn't always look like the same thing or even what you would like it to look like. And so there's an art of contentment that is learned through the difficult season and trial. And I know that in our own season, when I reflect back, yeah, it was really, really hard. I had to, there was an essence of having to mourn and grieve what my heart longed for, because I could not have it in that moment or in that season. And still, and the degree in which I'd like it, it's not being given yet. And that's okay, because I've learned how to be content in that situation. But yeah, there was a long just journey for us where we had to learn, okay, God's looking for faithfulness. What does faithfulness look like in the place that I'm in? And can I find peace in that? Can I just find peace in my relationship with God? I think oftentimes one of the struggles of sent ones is that we find much of our identity in the assignment that God has given to us. And we want to go about it with all of our heart. And God understands that and gets that. But more than the destination of where he'll bring us, he thrives in our journey, because that's where he refines us and makes us more like him. And so learning to enjoy the journey more than the destination. It's a hard thing, because we're always just thinking ahead and wanting to be at the finish line of different chapters in our lives. But learning to enjoy the journey, that's where I believe the Lord enjoys that season more. It's hard to, I think it just takes time. So for those people who are in that situation or in that season of time, I just encourage them, lean into Jesus, keep an open mind, and ask him what faithfulness looks like, and enjoy just being a son and allowing that to form your identity instead of the mission that he's called you to go after.
So good.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. Honestly, Tom, what you're talking about, I mean, sometimes the journey sucks,
Yeah.
It's not always fun. And it is hard as kind of guys and gals that lean more towards the apostolic, evangelistic kind of calling and focus. It is hard sometimes to be in the moment, not always get 20 steps ahead, but learning to be content in that, and learning to really be a tool in God's hands that he can use as he wishes, is difficult. I had a mentor tell me many years ago, a really good question that we can ask when it comes to faithfulness that has really impacted my life. I've tried to teach my kids to ask the same question, but it really is about, just asking Jesus, Lord, how can I put a smile on your face? Like, what does it look like to live for his pleasure? What does it look like to live for his joy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's that old, there's that verse, the joy of the Lord is my strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many times, and there are a couple different ways you can interpret that, but one of the ways that's very different, Tom, that hits exactly with what you're talking about, the joy of the Lord. Whose joy is it? It's his joy.
Mm.
The joy of the Lord is his joy. It's not some joy deep inside of us that's hidden that we need to unravel or bring out. And I wonder if sometimes when we say, okay, if his joy is going to be my strength, then bringing a smile to his face and putting joy in his heart by the way that I'm living
Mm-hmm.
is going to be the way that I am able to stay strong and faithful in good or bad circumstances. When his joy is really what I'm going after, honoring him, glorifying him,
Mm-hmm.
putting a smile on his face, that thought there has really helped me in difficult seasons and difficult moments to really stay focused on what does it look like just to make him happy? What does it look like to please him?
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's easy on a podcast to say that that's the way we need to live all the time and all of that, but during difficult moments, that's not always easy.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so, Tom, talk to me through, and this will be kind of the last question. We're going to be running out of time here in just a few, but here at the end, brother, how have you and your wife during difficult, dark seasons where maybe you don't know what the future looks like, where maybe you've wanted to give up, or maybe you've thought, I don't know if you've ever thought this, probably not you, Tom, but other people, of course, have thoughts like, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. Like it'd be easier just to get a job and make some money and just be, just do something else. Like during those seasons, brother, what's kept you going? What's kept you strong? What's kept you focused? Is there anything that you could throw out there that is sent ones are confused, or maybe they're in a dark season right now? What's maybe a word of advice that you could give on ways that we could continue to stay faithful even in the midst of uncertainty?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that comes to my mind immediately is something that one of our mentors in the work has shared with us. That guy's Jeff Sundell. I'm sure many of you guys know him or have heard of him. But one of the things he shared with us was when the going gets tough, and it will. The thing you need to be able to do in those moments is to fall back on your calling and to know how you were called and why you were called. At the end of the day, calling is very intertwined with obedience, and it doesn't mean that there's always going to be harvest seasons, right? We all live for the harvest as a worker of God. We dream of the harvest, but there's going to be many seasons of plowing, and I think there was many seasons where I even visited that question myself, especially when we were first starting. And it was like hands to the plow by the sweat of our brow and yielding little return. And it was difficult. And just asking the question, is this really what we're cut out to? Did I really hear him clearly when he told us to go do this? And a lot of those questions will come to our minds. But I think to be able to fall back on, no, I remember when God spoke to me, and I remember this is what he said. And so to have resolve in your heart to say, hey, even though it's really, really difficult, I know that this is what God has asked of me, and I want to follow through and to finish what he asked me to start. And knowing that the timeline of things, it might not be as quickly as I'd like to accomplish it, but it will be done as we continue just to say, yes, Lord, and to give him not just our verbal yes, but our physical yes as well. And it just, some of those seasons too, you have a lot of good reminders in the Word too about people who were faithful to their calling, but saw little fruit in the ministry, and just reminding yourself too that the fruit is up to God. Only He can yield that, and we just have to be faithful with carrying out the actions that He's asked us to carry out. So
Yeah.
Fall back on your calling. Remember what God has spoken to you, and if especially even in the midst of making decisions and moving forward, I think that advice has been helpful when you're not sure what to do next and you're having a hard time hearing the Lord. That same mentor also said, what did he last ask you to do? And just continue to do that. Maybe there's more of a season that he wants you to do of that. So stay faithful there until the Lord speaks again. And so that's been advice that we've heeded and held close to our hearts in the midst of dark seasons and hard seasons. And we still keep that advice close to heart for sure.
Yeah, that's so good, Tom. Thank you, man. I think that's a great point to end on, bro. Honestly, if you're out there listening right now and you know that you've heard the voice of the Lord, but maybe things are difficult, maybe you're in a dark season, like Tom said, fall back on that calling. Remember what he said to you. Remember the last thing the Lord asked you to do, and just lean into that. Stay faithful to what he's called you to do. And like he said at the beginning, if you are in a tough season, if you are having trouble hearing his voice, take some time out, pray, fast. Fasting is, I don't know why he did this, Tom, but God has connected spiritual breakthrough to fasting. I wish it would have been to chocolate cake or something awesome like that. But for whatever reason, he's connected spiritual breakthrough to prayer and fasting combined. And so if you're having trouble, if you're facing difficulty, man, step aside, allow God to speak to you by giving up certain things for a season and see what type of breakthrough he may give. Tom, thank you for sharing your story, man. Thank you for just being so faithful to what God called you to do. I want to take us back to the beginning to close this out here. You made a comment at the beginning when the Lord originally called you. You were helping lead a church in a traditional church setting, and the Lord asked you, are you willing to take my church to the people that would never come and attend this thing, right?
That's right.
And I think that's a beautiful question that we really need to contemplate as we're listening to this podcast today. Are we willing to take the gospel to people who may never show up to a Sunday morning gathering? Are we willing to take the love of Christ to our neighbors and our friends and our family who may never hear a clear presentation of the gospel unless we share it with them? Are we willing to go to people who never in a million years would wake up on a Sunday morning and say, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go to church. Are we willing to be witnesses? Are we willing to be ambassadors? Are we willing to be sent ones that are going out to take the gospel and to take the love of Christ to those out there? And so for those of you listening today, guys, if you need help in this, if you want coached about how this can happen, if you need training, please reach out to us. You can check us out at sentones.com. We've got a YouTube channel. We're on Instagram and Facebook. I don't know what all the handles are. You can find us. Just Google it out there. And but we would love to help you and guide you and help you become the best sent one that you possibly can be for the glory of Jesus. Tom, thanks, brother. Appreciate you, man. And thanks for being on with us today, bro.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I appreciate the honor and the opportunity. And thanks for having me on as well.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Sent Ones podcast. For practical next steps or more content like this, check us out at sentones.com, or you can subscribe with your favorite podcast provider. Hope to see you guys next time.